Hello there. Will Rishi Sunak really sort out the Northern Ireland Protocol? Or is he going soft on Brexit? Now, if you haven't already done so, please do subscribe and then like and comment below. Rishi Sunak is reportedly on a mission to sort out the Northern Ireland Protocol, and reports indicate that there is movement on the EU side to make the protocol far less onerous by reducing checks and paperwork down to a level that makes it just about an invisible border. But that invisible border would still be down the Irish Sea. And there's also the issue of ECJ jurisdiction over Northern Ireland to be sorted out, which I'll come on to in a moment. Anyway, on this invisible border, it all sounds so very beguiling. But my question is, if this border can be made invisible, then why not put it in the logical place, which is between the UK and the Republic of Ireland? After all, there is already a currency border there, together with a civil and criminal law border and a tax border. And no one raises an eyebrow at those, do they? But the Irish Sea trade border is a symbol for Brussels, a symbol of a victory for the EU over the UK, our price for leaving them. And remember, that Irish Sea border is the only thing that the EU can use to justify ECJ jurisdiction over Northern Ireland. And by continuing to agree to it, the UK government would be permanently acknowledging Northern Ireland's reduced status within the UK. Now, some try and point out that we cannot put a border across Ireland because of the Belfast Agreement. But as I've already pointed out, there is already a currency and a legal border there anyway. On top of that, as the Belfast Agreement also protects the Unionist community in Northern Ireland, putting a border down the Irish Sea must be just as unlawful. And I say that given the wording in the protocol that the Belfast Agreement takes primacy over the protocol. So any statute law saying otherwise is surely not in line with the protocol nor with the Belfast Agreement. But now we also get rumblings from the interior of Whitehall that the UK red line of no ECJ control over Northern Irish affairs is about to be changed into a green light. Yes, the Northern Ireland Secretary Chris Heaton-Harris has failed to confirm that the UK will end ECJ jurisdiction over Northern Ireland either by negotiation or by unilateral lawmaking. And he also said that he was not privy to the talks because the negotiator here was the Foreign Secretary, James Cleverly. Now, this is a very significant issue. So surely all ministers must be aware of what red lines are in play, especially for the Northern Ireland Secretary over this particular matter. Do you believe him when he says that? But it also points to the UK agreeing long-term to a border down the Irish Sea when it shouldn't be needed. It sounds to me like the Sunak crew are going soft on Brexit. And for the answer to that, maybe you need to ask yourselves, what would the WEF want to see? And all this might not be enough to placate the loyalist community anyway. The DUP might still end up refusing to participate in a power-sharing executive with Sinn Féin, even after the new Stormont elections to be held next year. Now, Facts4EU.org has highlighted some interesting stats that show the European Union is also having a very torrid time with people coming across its borders. The stats come from the EU's own latest Asylum Trends publication that came out yesterday and shows that more than 5 million people seeking refuge have entered what is known as the EU plus countries of the 27 EU member states plus Norway and Switzerland so far this year. and in August asylum applications reached a high of 84,500 and another 255,000 registrations for temporary protection were also made that month. And some of these found themselves in the overwhelmed Ter Apel processing centre in the Netherlands, where many people ended up sleeping outside in tents. And last month, the NL Times reported that more than 80 underage asylum seekers were put in a tent and fed mouldy bread for breakfast. So it's not just the UK finding it difficult to deal with the numbers involved. But you'd never get that from the BBC, would you? And the EU only deports 6% of those deemed to have no right to be in the EU. But we all know where some of them end up, don't we? But just because they have difficulties in this area does not make it okay for us to emulate them, or to have to receive theirs via the back door. Now, with the amount of scare stories filling the press about how much taxes are going to rise when Jeremy Hunt announces his autumn statement next week, it makes me think that we really are being lined up for a massive tax squeeze. But much of the fear-mongering is based on the fact that when putting together his autumn statement, the Chancellor Jeremy Hunt will have to have investigated all of the taxes and all of the options available to him. So when stories emerge that he is considering upping the income tax top rate band to 50p, for example, it doesn't mean that's what will actually happen. But the very fact so many stories are spinning around leads me to think it won't be as bad as the sum of all the stories, but it will remove a significant amount of money from our pockets across the board. And this will go down like the proverbial lead smelly thing, especially amongst the wealthier types with the broadest shoulders. But the Chancellor is also said to be ready to slash back on public spending, something that will not please the left. No, they just want as much of our money poured into the public sector, whatever the outcome might be. On top of that, it might not just be central government coming for your dosh, as one option that will be investigated is whether or not to give local councils the powers to increase council tax by more than 2% without a local referendum. And Westminster would then blame councils for the rises, while cutting back on central government cash to local authorities. And doing that would squeeze us from both ends of the political structure. And I wonder how many councils are looking at increasing the likes of car parking charges, for example. On top of this, we have the wage demands from the public sector flooding in. And nearly 100 NHS trusts will be affected by the nurses' strike, and 100,000 civil servants have now voted to walk out. The nurses want a pay rise of over 17%. And the Public and Commercial Services Union wants what it calls a substantial offer from the government for the civil service, or there will be sustained strike action. Although after the pandemic and work from home, many people would question whether they'd see any difference. Anyway, it looks like the Tories will not only be balancing the books next week, but also balancing the condemnation they receive from both left and their own right supporters. And finally, when subscribing, please don't forget to press that little bell and also select the all option, or you won't get any notifications when I publish a new video. And thank you all so much for taking the time to watch the show.